All set. Good morning, welcome to Somerset, welcome to the Camerton branch line. That archway just there behind us is an old abandoned railway, but we're not treating it as an abandoned railway today. It's actually a portal for us into a completely different world, the world of canal industrial archaeology. And what remains behind there is a site like nothing else, including one of the most terrifying inventions you've ever come across. My name's Paul.
And I'm Rebecca.
Welcome to today's journey. So that really is a portal, and seeing what's ahead of us now, even from just this first point of view, really does feel like you're entering into a different world. It's peaceful, there's trees everywhere, and today's tale is what circles this field. And ahead of us is the first treat of the day, which just so happens to be called lock number 15. We have covered this canal before, and we did the 10-mile length of the Somersetshire Coal Canal. Now, one thing we didn't do was spend a lot of time here, and so we thought we'd give you a little bit more from this one particular site. It's Combe Hay. Now, go back to the late 1700s and have a look at some of the old newspapers, and you'll find a lot of adverts in those papers for stonemasons and people that would move earthworks, so navvies of the time. And you'll find adverts for people to undertake up to 30 locks. So something big was going to happen right here. Thankfully, that undertaking is here for everybody to see, because the trust that look after this canal have really worked the last couple of years on the vegetation, and right now we're stood inside 15, I want to say, because 16 is where the railway bridge was, and they've even cleared deep down in the lock where the water would come out. And yeah, what a gorgeous sight that is. So lock 14 just ahead of us now, and we can walk right into it. Now, although that advert that I discussed appears in 1803, well, that wasn't the first plan here, and it wasn't the first advert, because locks were not even considered a few years earlier when this was being built. What was being considered is something completely terrifying, but we'll come to that when we get towards the top of the hill. Look at this old wooden lock here, nearly sort of gone. And there we can walk right inside this chamber here. It looks incredibly safe. Some of the ones we've seen on the Wilts and Barks, quite terrifying in there. Bit ropey, brick construction, but this is pure masonry lined, as per the adverts. And the picture we've got just ahead of us is absolutely gorgeous. So, as we walk alongside lock, I think 13, there's a milestone just down there on the floor. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a metal plaque on it, so there's nothing to read, but it would have been there stating probably the distance, I suspect maybe the distance to the Kent Canal. So it must be one of the most iconic abandoned canal images you'll ever see, at least in this country. The site of the Combe Hay locks up ahead of us, one after the other, masonry blocks a few feet wide and high, just the most beautiful image. 1767, I believe, that coal was found Portland direction, and the roads were the only way to transport that, horse, cart, that sort of thing. And they needed to deploy a canal. They needed to engineer something to link up with the potential markets for moving this around in a much better way than the roads allowed. And of course, canals were just starting to take off in the country, the industrial north. So here we have the Somerset Coal Canal, and 10-mile route, but they had a problem, and the problem was right here in Combe Hay. Right?
Are you?
Yeah. It's weird because when the sun's out,
oh, it's lovely.
Lovely and warm.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, hat off, get the vitamin D in.
Need your hat back on now.
Need my hat back on because the sun goes behind a cloud and it like goes dark.
And it's cold then.
It's cold and dark. Really weird, isn't it? When we were just walking in the lock earlier, it's like an abandoned tunnel, isn't it? It goes really cold, different atmosphere altogether. So the problem those canal engineers had was classic canal problem. Water doesn't flow very well and hold a boat up and down a hill. And this particular spot, well, we had 135 feet or so to traverse. So the most obvious solution was locks, but the problem with locks, they use a lot of water. So at that period of time, the late 1700s, they were trying all sorts of weird and wonderful things. They really needed to conserve water, and they tried to do that here before this beautiful site before us was even considered. So we've reached the top of this first section. That lock there, I think maybe lock 11, is possibly the worst condition we've seen so far. Lots of masonry blocks still inside it, and we've reached what I think they're called the bull nose. So basically the canal now went back on itself, and you can see the huge hill there in front of us. We still need to climb that. And the locks here, well, here's a sort of a basin where you'd have to turn right around and head back, almost back on yourself, up the hill and around the curve just there. Of course, you imagine now behind us the water will be going this way in terms of the downhill. Just step over here. Now, again here you've got a hole here which would have housed the mechanism for pulling up and down, for want of a better word, the sluice. And I'm sure people will tell me the exact name. And there, once that sluice is pulled up, the water from the main part of the canal behind us would pour into there, and it would pour down some channels or some tunnels that were built into the lock, and they'd come out just down there, and that would fill the entire lock. So we've just left the first lock on this curve round the hill in our distance, and we've probably got one of the biggest distances between here and the next lock. And at the next lock there's quite a treat, but before we show you that, and while Rebecca and I continue to head this way, let's flip back to the studio and tell you why this was an afterthought, why all these locks were an afterthought, and why 5 years before that there was another article in the newspaper, and it wasn't asking people to build locks, it was asking them to build a caisson. And welcome to the studio, which also doubles up as our garden.
A very cold and wet, damp studio right now.
It is actually raining, isn't it?
It is.
Right, so first of all, to show you this little experiment, we're going to have to adapt an old fish tank. So let's do that first. So fish tank now filled completely, and this is here to represent what they used instead of locks. This is a caisson, an enclosed cistern filled with water. Completely terrifying when I tell you what's going to happen next. So you need to imagine that this fish tank caisson is 30 to 40 feet deep, so we're saving ourselves a lot of locks over this period. I've now drawn on each end an entrance to this caisson. I've drawn an in and I've drawn an out. Now the in is the top, and that was where you'd enter the caisson, but you wouldn't just enter it by just floating into it. You'd have to enter into one of these first. This is a sealed unit, a sealed trunk. That would be in the water. So in order to enter this quite terrifying caisson, your boat would come along at this top level, and it would line up with the in there. Now this watertight piping, completely watertight, as I said, it would be ballasted and held by 2 rods. That would be here. Now, you have to imagine it's not filling with water because I haven't done it quite watertight, but a water-sealed gate would open here, and you would float on in to this heavily ballasted unit here. But again, airtight. So now, all of a sudden, you're in the caisson and you're submersed in water. They ballasted it because it needed to be float. It needed to act in the same way as a diver would, not sink to the bottom and not float to the top. So a lot of ballast was in here to weigh it down, and now the rods that would hold this would just let it slowly sink downwards like this. Now remember, you're still inside this watertight unit, and you've now gone all the way to the bottom, and all of a sudden here you are. Now you can open the outdoor here like that, then obviously you'd just be able to float your boat out, assuming it was at the right level. So all this time you've got to remember that you're underwater but inside an airtight unit with masonry lined either side. Now it probably doesn't take an engineer, probably takes someone like me to work out why this didn't work. Well, they said it was because the fuller clay, the earth either side, got wet and it basically pushed the sides in, and they had a number of incidents in trialing this and in using it where it started to collapse and the actual unit here got stuck. So can you quite imagine now you're halfway down this Caisson unit and it's stuck. You're in there in your barge just sat happily waiting, and you realise the whole mechanism's got stuck. I can't think of anything more terrifying. And yeah, there are reports of people being stuck in those caissons. And as I stand here now, in the next lock along, what a treat. How about that, Rebecca?
That is quite amazing.
To see those locks there, and let's assume they might have been replaced on 1 or 2 occasions, but they could be up to 220 years old.
Yep.
So flipping back to the map, the 2 initial caissons of the 3 envisaged were located close to the now named Cassion House. They would have meant the canal would have taken this route instead of all the gorgeous locks that we see today. Clearly, based on those 1803 adverts for canal locks, they didn't work. Now, whilst the locks were being constructed, a temporary inclined plane was in use to carry the vessels up and down. Now, there is one more stretch of water in this area that we found last time, but we had no idea what it was for. This time would be different. Okay, we can't go any further along the canal this way. Walking back towards the bullnose corner because there's one more thing we want to show you. Again, part of this wonderful area that we're in, this probably a square mile, no more than that. So many locks, so many stories, and there's one more story to show you, which we hope will find of interest. Well, it took a bit of finding, but we found the canal. And you can see just here on our left is a dip, a good sized ditch, probably not that big in terms of the traditional canal size, but certainly large enough to put a vessel on. And this confused us a lot because we thought, well, maybe there was another caisson at the end of here. It turns out that's not the case, because as I said earlier, when you build your 30 locks or however many are down there, certainly sort of 20 plus, well, you've still got to consider the lack of water. So this leat was built. Didn't turn out to be a canal, although they did use it to move coal, because at the end of here was something that needed coal. Just up ahead we'll show you exactly what it was. And oh my goodness me, how did we miss this last time?
I don't know.
What?
It was overgrown. It's
Yeah.
part of what they've uncovered.
They've uncovered what that was built for. The lack of water in this canal because of all the locks that they'd used. Well, that meant that they needed to pump it back up again. Now, remember when we mentioned the incline earlier? Well, they used the leat, or the bit of the incline, the bottom of the incline, and they pulled water up from there to here. So we're back at the height of the canal now, the highest point, and it would have fed water all the way along there to the other side of Caisson House, where it would have fed it back into the canal. So this site here was an extremely early pump house. I assume steam driven, because I think they transported coal all the way along the canal, or this leat here, to power this here. and I'm so pleased they started sort of restoration work, or they tried to uncover it. Look at this. How do we not know this was here? And in fact, this was called Engine Woods for this reason. So from Engine Woods and the pumping house, which we completely missed last time we were here, thanks for watching. Genuinely appreciate the privilege of being able to make these films, and that's made possible by you guys watching, and of course our Patreon. So if you like this type of content and you want to help make these videos, well, you can sign up to our Patreon, and we'll put the link in the description below.
And YouTube members.
And YouTube members.
YouTube members.
Same difference. But thanks for watching, people. We'll see you this time next week.